Hello, everybody. It's Atheism UK's podcast here, and I'm Andy Phillips, and we've got John, Rich, and Embers with us. Hi, guys. How you doing?
Hello.
Not bad, not bad.
All good, all good.
Cheers,
John,
everyone.
Are you feeling better now, mate?
No. No, I'm still wiped out by this bloody COVID. And
Yes.
that's why I'm still on the water, because tea just doesn't taste nice.
Oh, well.
You'll
get there, you'll get there.
Ginger in this. No, I haven't actually got coffee in it. I haven't even got tea in it this week. I've let the side down badly.
Slap your wrist there.
It is taking rather longer to recover than I hoped.
So, listen, today we're going to be talking about morality, and it's a big subject between theists and atheists. I don't think we're going to be here to sort of just go through the moral arguments again. They've been done a million times. We're going to touch on them, obviously, in some of the aspects of it, but I think we just really want to sort of talk about the concept of morality and how it applies to our sort of worldview, as opposed to a religious worldview. And because there's a couple of different things here. There's this concept that, you know, morality comes from God, and the way that religions deem things as moral. We've spoken sort of extensively about some of the things that we think are pretty immoral about religions. So I guess we're going to be talking a little bit about that. But John, you just recently written an article which hasn't been published quite yet. By the time people watch this, it may have been published. But do you want to just sort of kick off on this? So it gives a bit of a background of where you come from on the question of morality.
Yeah, sure. I don't think it's a useful word. I don't feel we need the word morality at all. And I know that, Rich, you feel like this as well, because it seems to me that, you know how early Europeans used to hold a midwinter festival to celebrate the fact that the days were perceptibly lengthening, so we knew spring was coming. And we got together, we drank and we ate and we had a good time, and we called it Saturnalia. What happened to that is the Christians came along and stole it. They rechristened it, if I can use that word, Christmas. And then we had it. It was theirs. They claimed it. So I think morality is the same. I think for millions of years, social animals have been developing relationship systems based on cooperation, empathy, trust. And then the Christians decided to make a takeover bid for it.
And not just the Christians, all other religions have also made their play to take over and claim the exclusive province of that word and what it means and what have you. And as you say, you know, I think it's actually it's by giving it the name morality. One of the things that we've done is that's a lazy label for a very complicated and complex, interconnected ideas. But yeah, so and as I say, it's been hijacked. It has been absolutely hijacked by religions, and I'm sure that, you know, as I say, we don't want to go into the breadth and depth of the moral argument, but I just find it actually reaches a point where it's now irritating when it's, you know, well, if you don't have God, how can you be moral? And that is a major irritation for me when you actually look at the world and there are religious people that are profoundly horrible people. There are religious people who are good people. There are atheists who are really good people. And there are atheists who are thoroughly horrible people. It seems to me in the real world, whether you're religious or not, has very, very little bearing on whether or not you're actually a good person, whether you actually, you know, work to help people. And especially as somebody whose entire professional life, either in education or as a police officer, I've actually dedicated much of my life to trying to help people. And I've never been religious. I've never had a God guiding me. And many of these so-called moral rules that have been put in place by these so-called gods were actually in place long before humans made them up. I find it, well, I find it insulting, but I find it majorly irritating when they claim it.
And you're right. It is not just the Christians who claim it, but the odd thing is, each religion claims that they own it, and you have to belong to their God in order to be moral. And yet they're all different.
And actually, one of the things, not only do religions hijack morality, I think they actually pervert it, because I mean, there are some very, very horrible religious practices and excuses for treating people badly, which I would say would be profoundly immoral, that are claimed to actually be moral by the religious. I mean, a great example is the treatment of gay people. I've got gay friends who I wouldn't dream of treating badly because they were gay, whereas there are many religions that believe it's their moral duty to shun them, to persecute them, and in extreme cases kill them. And they think that's the moral thing to do. Well, that's because that's what their religion tells them is the moral thing to do. And if murdering people,
I'm just going to say, do you think that, I mean, there's a, if you start looking at this quite deeply, you can understand why a religion would take on the mantle of the sort of guardians of morality. You understand if a religion gets put in place, then they've got to question, or they've got to have some sort of say over morality, what is right and wrong, and guidance and all those sort of things. You can sort of understand exactly why that happened. So the concept of them hijacking it, I think, is completely right. But they're hijacking it because they really wouldn't have a choice. I mean, if you're early Christian and someone asks you what's right and wrong, you've got to go to something. And I think the concepts of what makes things moral from a God, if it's proposed that it's coming from a God, makes it an absolute. This is the word of God, and this is what God says, and so therefore it is moral. And I think some of the things you said about being disgusted with that is that it actually takes it away from us humans and the human race, Homo sapien, to actually start taking control and responsibility for what we as a group or a tribe, think of as moral. And morals can change. Morals adapt over time. And so just to having the concept, and this is what sort of worries me, is having the concept of moral absolutes given by God is you can't discuss them. You can't change them because they're given by God.
Yeah.
And if you believe in God and you believe in what your Bible or your Qur'an or whatever it is that you're reading, if you read that and believe that a God exists to start with, and that this is the word of God, and to be good, you need to follow God. Then to be good, you need to throw someone off a building if they're homosexual. Yeah. That blows my mind, because there is no room for discussion. There's no room to say, are we right? And this is the whole point of, sort of the key to moral philosophy. I mean, if you read things like, Immanuel Kant or Nietzsche or, I don't know, Hume, or all those people have been doing it, and Aristotle, and all these people have been doing it.
People have been thinking about this for a while, yes.
And they haven't come up with a definitive answer on morality. In fact, if you read all that stuff, there's a lot of questions in that, because I think, with moral philosophy, they're actually saying, is it this or is it that? Not always. I mean, some people like Nietzsche sort of have a definite concept of what morals are and how they're sort of shaped. But is he right? Well, that's the discussion. And that's what you don't get with these religious, God-given moral absolutes. we can't move forward. So we can't change our minds. And to me, that's incredibly dangerous.
You're right. I've got a couple of things to say about that. First of all, it's not just gays. They just love to disapprove of all sorts of harmless, loving sexual behaviors because for some reason they want to stick their noses into our genitalia. I mean, mind your own business. And the only question that we need to address in sexual behavior is consent.
Absolutely. But that's not what their book says.
No. But the other thing is, Andy used the word concept, and I agree. I think that morality is a concept, and we can think of it, and we can think of rules, and we can think of a possible absolute power that sets out these strict rules. But that's not what we observe in the natural realm. All sorts of things happen that cannot be addressed from those absolute rules because each incident is individual.
Yeah,
has to be taken event by event, case by case.
Yeah, like to hear Embers's opinion on some of this as a psychologist. You know, from a psychological point of view, where do you think this idea about morality comes from, or how has it developed in modern humans?
Well, I'm going to take this back to basics. I know you've discussed that you don't particularly like the word morality, but it's in the dictionary. It's got a specific meaning,
and it is used.
To give it its simplest definition, it's simply to do with the right or wrong, or the good or bad of human behaviour, and that's as complicated as it gets. Fortunately or unfortunately, we've got masses and masses and masses of navel gazing on this by various philosophers over centuries that really, as far as I'm concerned, goes way too deep. The biggest problem we have as atheists that we hear again and again and again is from religionists who say, how can you possibly have any morals if they don't come from God? Now, we know all the arguments for that.
Yes. And it's quite an easy question to answer. It's just a pain.
It is indeed. But a lot of people who follow religion or are deeply involved in it actually operate on a two-tier system. They operate in their everyday lives with the morals that their particular society, and we know all societies have slightly different takes on morals, although some of them are universal. Some things that are acceptable in other societies are not acceptable in our society, and vice versa. Now, they also operate, we were talking about compartmentalization, that we humans can think one thing in one area of the brain and believe something in another, and they can operate as well, given the moral dictates of their particular religion. So they're actually operating on a two-tier system to actually please themselves. Now, you can't tell me that any Christian living in the UK at the minute advocates going out and stoning your children to death or your wife to death because they committed adultery, or your children have been cheeky to you, and all the sorts of things that we see in the Bible. Now, the biggest problem for me with religionists is they're very time set, because let's talk about Christianity. It only goes back so far. So are you actually trying to tell us that in the couple of million years since modern humans have been around, before people came up with the concept of God, that people didn't live together with any sort of moral code, that they came up with it in their own cultures? It's absolutely ridiculous.
I was watching a video actually fairly recently. It was actually about law, and what they were saying was the earliest evidence of a legal system that we found dates all the way back to 24,000 BCE. That's a long time, and that's a long time before Christianity came along. And it was a codified moral code. Now, I mean, our own legal system is to an extent morality codified, but I still think that it still needs a lot of work, and it's a continual work in progress, because I still think there are laws out there that are incredibly immoral. But yeah, you can't tell me that the concept of theft and murder, for example, two of the favorite ones that religionists like to pull out of the Old Testament and the Ten Commandments, you can't tell me that they were acceptable before. No, I know that the story of the Exodus isn't true, and we've covered all that, but you can't tell me that those things were not codified within a moral framework before the so-called Exodus. You can't tell me that, because it's nonsense.
Well, we know for a fact that there, things like what is the Ten Commandments in the Bible. We know that the Egyptians had exactly the same thing. They had a commandment rule. We know that from history. We know that the Romans had it. We know that the Greeks had it. We know
Code of Hammurabi, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we know all these things. So I don't think that the problem is the hijacking per se. I mean, it feels like they took ownership because they had this religion and they had to address it, and so they took ownership and put down what they thought. But if you go back to this concept, which we've spoken about before, that the Bible is written by human beings, and if you read the Qur'an, if you read the Bible, you read what people were thinking at that time. It comes from the knowledge of that time. It doesn't come from beyond the universe. It comes from the people of that time. Then they might keep on saying that it is God's rule or God's law, or God says this and Jesus
timeless
says that.
and all that.
But that's scripture, and we know from some of the other podcasts that we've had and some of the other things that maybe me and John have done with with interviews with people, we know that it is human written, and we know that it's of the time, and we know that if they're going to put something in place, they're going to have to put something about what's right and what's wrong. So, you say that it was hijacked. Yes, it's a word which I think is apt, but they would have had to have done that. But again, my problem basically is that it isn't moral. There are some things we all agree with, but it's like, for instance, thou shalt not kill, for instance. Well, that sounds like an obvious thing, but when you actually go into the moral philosophy of it, when is it right to kill? Is it right to kill?
And you'll find many people have very, very, very different opinions about that.
That's the point, and it all depends on situation, and this is why I think this concept of moral objectives or objective morals falls by the wayside there, and this is the thing that religion builds the basis on, and they do it because they think that if they've got something which is absolutely set in stone, they will not deviate from that. Then people who follow that religion have some sort of moral guideline. They have a moral standard to live up to, and that is a psychological thing. So it doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but it just means they've got a very, very strong moral outline. This is what morals are, and we own them as our whatever religion it is. And we will defend them.
And also, they can identify their own in-group.
Yes.
Yeah. But this is the point for me, that those things, we can say that some of those things in the Bible and the Quran and all that sort of thing are immoral, and they are. But
in fact, some of them I would say were downright disgusting.
Oh, sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, the appeal is, if you haven't read the Bible, go and read the bloody Bible. Seriously, go and read the Bible, because if you go to church and you believe in God and all those sort of things, read the bloody Bible.
The whole thing.
Read the Quran. Actually, read it. Read what's in there. It's not what you think it is.
Yeah, I've just been reading the the New Testament today, which I happened to find while I was clearing out, because in our last podcast, I pointed out that I was christened in a Methodist church. I forgot to add that my parents are not religious at all. So religion was never discussed in the home. Why I was sent to a Methodist Sunday school, I've got no idea. But I actually found the Bible that was awarded to me just before I was expelled in 1965. Just got my name and a little sort of
Showing your age now there, Mark.
For promotion day, whatever that was. But I've still got it, and it's a great reference. It really is. But if we look back to the so-called 10 Commandments in the Old Testament, in Exodus and Deuteronomy as well, there are actually more than 10 Commandments, as people seem to think of.
Yeah. There's actually two different sections in the Bible about the commandments.
Indeed,
there's even two different sets of 10 Commandments. So that's
yes, just to confuse things. But if you look at some of them, you shall have no God before me. Don't make any graven images. I mean, they're not moral lessons. They're just scare tactics. They're not going to make you a good or a bad person in society. So they're absolutely meaningless, and they're particularly meaningless to atheists because God doesn't exist in the first place. It makes odds. But things that are more universal, like thou shalt not kill. Obviously, there are. As Andy says, that there are times when, absolutely.
Well, so even in the Bible, thou shalt not kill unless I say so, and I say so, and I say so quite a lot, actually.
But don't steal. These are universal things in human society across time. They are well predating any thought about gods and scripture and the Bible and all the other religious texts, because we in our own society you just can't go around killing people. You can't go around killing your neighbours because their trees are overgrown your fence. There are consequences for that, and people don't need to have consequences like ending up in prison for life or having the death sentence if you're in America. People just know you don't do this because it's accepted in your society. You don't steal things from people because you just know it's wrong. You don't have to be told by a deity or scripture that you shouldn't be doing that. Fine,
and yet
steal, steal if you're hungry.
Yeah,
you're starving. But everything's got a but.
Yeah, everything's got that but. We can all think of the classic case of where lying is a moral act, where theft can be a moral act. And then there are things that are deemed being immoral, which have no moral dimension to them whatsoever.
Yes.
Again, coming back to homosexuality, that does not have a moral dimension to it whatsoever, provided consent is involved. The moment you lose consent in any sort of sexual situation, that's when it becomes immoral. That's the point of morality there, not the act itself. But again, as we said before in previous podcasts, not only is it about identifying that in group, but it's about controlling that in group as well.
I love your use of in-group there, because it's not just how you behave sometimes. To be a member of an in-group, it seems to be moral in some cases to cut the tip off your little boy's penis.
Yeah. And
how weird is that?
And there have been some really strange, discussions about, actually it's a health reason, and that's merged into, that's certainly in America. It doesn't happen so much here, but certainly in America, it was almost standard practice in America. That's changing. That's changing quite quickly now in America. But yeah, here that was never that was never actually a major thing, I don't think. But
there's only 2% of cases where it is medically indicated to be necessary, and you don't discover that until puberty.
Yeah, that sort of thing is just a little bit bizarre to me as well. There's lots of things that are bizarre to me. I live in a world of being bewildered by stuff that happens, especially religious stuff that happens. It is bewildering. There's a couple of things I want to say though. The very first thing is that at some point we're going to have to drag out of Embers why he got expelled from
Sunday school.
Sunday school. We've got to drag that out at one point. That's going to be, and that'd be a really big podcast.
I think
But the other thing is that we get a lot of people asking us, especially people who are religious, where we get our morals from, as if you've got to get them from somewhere. There has to be an external source. Because that's the sort of the way the mindset is of someone who believes in God or is religious, is that you as a human being can't have any morals. You come with a completely blank slate of morals, and it's got to come from somewhere. So it's a sort of loaded way of actually asking the question, where do you get your morals from? Well, we get this so often.
A loaded question
our social media.
Yeah.
It just gets to the point where we've answered it like a million times, and at the end of the day, so you just can't be bothered to tell you again.
Well, to take your first point, Andy, I'm going to stretch this Sunday school thing out like a soap opera, so that there's a build up. Yeah. So yeah, I don't want to give the audience the whole thing straight off, so we'll put a little bit of tension in there. But coming back to where we get our morals from, yeah, just like that. When children are born and brought up, they're immersed in society and their parents, and that's where they learn what is generally accepted as right or wrong, or good and bad. So yeah, you have to grow up in society. You have to deal with other children. You have to learn all these things as you grow, and you know instinctively what is right and what is wrong. We don't get it right all the time, of course. I've done things that I shouldn't really have done. I'm not proud of myself for some other things I've done. I don't have any regrets, but I thought, I could have done that differently. But these are things you have to learn. I don't get it from anywhere else. Maybe because, well, I know we're all educated.
Well,
we all study. We read a lot about things, so you can gain insights from that as well.
yeah.
But it's really the society that you live in. You don't want bad things to be done to you. Therefore, by consequence, you don't do bad things to anybody else. It's basically as simple as that.
So what you're talking about is it's well-being. It's what Immanuel Kant called goodwill. If you have
well-being is the word I was literally about to say myself. I mean, yeah, it's about maximizing well-being and minimizing harm. Now, every situation, there's always a trade-off. There is always situations where sometimes a minor bit of harm can actually maximize well-being. I mean, great example, very, very topical at the moment, vaccination. You get a shot in the arm, which may or may not hurt. You may get a reaction from it, which is your immune system kicking in. And so, for example, when I went for my first COVID vaccine, 24 hours, I had 24 hours of feeling very sick. I had to spend the day in bed with the shivers, and feeling absolutely wiped out. After that, I was fine, and as a result of that, I know that I have been exposed to a number of people who have had COVID. Sorry, John, but I have been exposed to a number of people who have had COVID. But because I work in education now, I have to be regularly tested. I've not caught it, and so the maximum. And I know people who have caught it, who have been vaccinated, who have not suffered as badly as others who have suffered and died because of it.
Yeah.
And for that 24 hours of discomfort, which you could say was not it didn't make me feel very well. But overall, for my well-being, it's maximised it because I've been able to avoid catching that bloody horrible disease. And that's just one example. You know, and maybe another one would be a childhood punishment now, maybe being sent to bed early or what have you. I'm not going to go into spanking because I'm not a fan of that either, because for various reasons. Well, again, consent. But spanking children, for example, I'm not a fan of that. There are other ways and more constructive ways to punish children for their indiscretions, but a little bit of discomfort then teaches them a valuable lesson for later on in life.
No, and just to sort of clarify that point and put it to the concepts of morality. You know, when I was a child, I mean, I don't agree with hitting kids. You know, I think that's just the wrong way to go around it. However, in my day, it's what they did. You know, it's what my parents did. You know, if I did something wrong, I'd be literally booted up the road by my dad, or dragged by my mum or whatever. But I remember sort of playing around with a power socket and a plug when I was very tiny. I mean, talking about sort of 3 and 4. And my mum come over and literally smacked me on the bottom, and it was hard, and told me, don't do that. You know, you don't touch that. Right. It's immoral to you could say it's immoral to smack a child or hit a child. Okay. But I never touched that plug ever again. So the immorality, if you look at it like that, the immorality of smacking me or hitting me as a child far outweighs the consequences. You know, it's
you could have been electrocuted.
Far outweighs the consequences of what could have happened if I electrocuted myself, and I never done it again, and I learned a lesson. So, you know, with those sort of things, I think there's stuff around those concepts. I mean, you could say, if you was ultra liberal, you could sort of say, no, you should sit them down and explain it to them and things like that. And that's great. But my mum just literally just went, clap. And I didn't do it again. So that's a sort of side of the, this moral balance. Is it right to hit children? Absolutely no. Every time it's not right to hit a child. Well,
there's always that but, isn't there?
There's always that but. You know, I wouldn't agree with it nowadays. I probably would if I was babysitting a kid or something, which I really don't want to do too much of. But if I was looking after a kid and they did something that they were just about to hurt themselves badly,
and again, that was probably more of a knee-jerk reaction from your mum.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I must have had a different upbringing from the rest of you. I had sort of quite strict parents. I remember being very, very young, and I was playing with an open fire, and they just let me get on with it. And I got burnt. I did, and strangely enough,
you didn't do that.
They didn't tell me off for that, but I've had a lifelong fascination with fire, and fireworks, and all sorts all my life. So that would explain that glow around you at the moment.
Yeah, that's got a very orange glow. You haven't got fire on, have you?
Yeah, my house is actually on fire at the minute. But, I don't care. But even though I had strict parents, and they're not religious, I never ever got hit all the way through being a child, teenager, etc. Until I left home. I went to a boys' grammar school, and they did have the cane and the slipper there. I never ever got caned or punished, and the main reason for that, all the way through my childhood, is because I never got caught.
I believe they call that the 11th commandment, isn't it? Yeah. Thou shalt not get caught.
Yeah. I'd like to broaden this out because although you're all right in that we don't get our morality down from a source or from a book or anything, we get it from each other. We fit into society. And this is an evolved adaptation, which you can see in lots of other social animals going back many more millions of years previous to the evolution of Homo sapiens. I mean, you've only got to have a dog as a pet, for example, to see how willing they are to be trained to fit in. Don't poo on the carpet. They want to be sociable. And that's what morality is.
And it would also
again. Sorry, Rich. I just go back to what Embers was saying about where our morality comes from, and we learn these things socially as we grow up. Because if you're at school, I keep on going back to school, but I remember pulling a girl's hair at school when I was a kid, pulling her ponytail because I thought it was funny, but it made her cry, and I was told off. And the thing that they said to me was, "How would you like it if that happened to you? How would you like it if someone pulled your hair?" And it made me go, "Don't laugh just because I'm bald now."
It has happened to you.
It happened to me so many times. No, but that's pretty typical of how we learn morals through our social upbringing. Is that how would you like it if that happened to you? And this really goes back again to Immanuel Kant's concept of well-being or goodwill, as he put it. If you've got the goodwill to other people, then you will be more moral if you do things through that. And this is the key of morals coming from God. It takes away that thought process that it's down to you. Morals don't come from God; they come from within you. Yeah. And so, if you can pass this off as, I don't have to think about morals because I just follow this, and that's my guideline. And that is really dangerous.
Yeah, and there's also the flip on that, because you have individuals that were bullied at school that grow up to become bullies themselves. But one of the reasons for that is a lot of bullies that become bullies, they don't see the people that bullied them having consequences. So I think there is a place for there being consequences for actions. But we've said, that's how society works, and that's where it can go wrong. So, you've got somebody that's being bullied, and their bully is not getting pulled up for it. They're not getting punished. They're not seeing consequences happen, and in frustration, they become bullies themselves. And that almost happened. That almost happened to me. This is, I'm gonna make an admission here. I was bullied. Probably why I became a policeman. Anyway, I was bullied at school, and I started myself because the bullies were never punished. The bullies were never caught. They were never punished. Even when I was being bullied in front of staff at that school, they let them get away with it. And I nearly started to bully another kid, who then reported it. And I did get pulled up over it, and I ended. It wasn't. If looking back on it now, it wasn't a severe punishment. I ended up having to sit out one lunch break on the naughty bench in the foyer of the school. But I literally just had to sit there, and I started thinking, actually, I don't like this. I don't like being pulled out. I don't like the fact that there are these consequences. They don't have to be harsh consequences, but it taught me that there are and can be consequences to those actions, and learn from them. But I became an anti-bullying sort of person ever since. I never bullied anyone again, and quite the opposite. I always tried to intervene when I saw other people being bullied.
You make the point that every incident is individual, and it should be considered on a case-by-case basis. And sometimes there's justice, and sometimes there isn't. But you'll all remember how last year there was an incident in Stratton where this recently released Muslim from jail got a knife and stabbed 2 or 3 people until 60 seconds later he was shot by the police. And nobody complained that they had murdered him immorally. Everybody agreed that the police had done a splendid job. Killing was right in that case. And interestingly, it's happened again more recently in New Zealand, where again, the police shot this stabber within a few seconds of him carrying out his rampage. So it's case by case.
So do you guys think that it can be seen as internal and subjective?
Not
I think
entirely.
not entirely. No, I think the phrase that I heard, which actually I think sums it up best, is it's situational morality. It's not objective. It's not subjective. It is sort of somewhere in between, and it is dependent upon the situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
And there have also been cases where the police have shot and killed somebody. Jean-Charles de Menezes, great example of the Stockwell shooting, where it was totally wrong. He was completely the wrong person. He was misidentified, and he was shot 7 times in the head. And he was completely innocent and completely unarmed.
Yeah.
And people have not been saying that those officers did a good job.
Yeah, but did they? I mean, I sort of remember the case, but is that immoral what they did, or is that mistaken identity basing themselves on what they believe to be a moral act?
They were acting on the information that they had at the time.
So was it immoral or immoral?
I'll have to come in with this, please.
Please.
In the UK, bearing in mind that they're getting this information in their ears all the time, so this situation's building up to the tension. I'm getting away from the subject a little bit here, but in the UK, the police do not shoot to kill; they shoot to stop. So the consequence of what you were saying, John, about the Stratton shooting, that person had to be stopped because there was no other way of stopping them. The consequence of shooting somebody is the likelihood that they might die. So if you're trying to stop somebody who thinks you think is a suicide bomber, there's another example of religious morals. Just to bring it back to the subject, you have got to stop them pretty quickly by any means you can. You're not necessarily trying to kill them, but there's a consequence of shooting somebody, and that means they may die.
And in the case of Jean-Charles de Menezes, they believed he was a suicide bomber, and they were following the instructions of how to handle that particular case.
So that's what I'm trying to say. So in that case, that's not immoral what they did.
Well, I don't think it's helpful to consider whose yardstick are you using for moral. This
is why we need the philosophical navel gazers.
No. These are value judgments, aren't they? And I've got an alternative expression for morality. It doesn't trip off the tongue, unfortunately, but I think we've got a foundation of evolved behaviors that are principles that we try to adhere to, but they almost certainly won't fit every circumstance, which is where, it's partly objective. I don't like that word either. We could go into that on another chat.
Yeah.
But it's partly subjective based on the situation, as Rich was saying. So here's my phrase. Contingent responses to incidents based on a foundation of evolved behaviors and socially developed norms.
Yeah, you're right. That doesn't trip off the tongue at all, does it?
That's easy for you to say, but
can you might turn that into an acronym, please?
It's fine to sort of delve into these things, but this is not how people operate in the real world. If you're a religionist and you've got the 10 Commandments and whatever,
or the 613 commandments,
indeed, whatever clergy or dictating to you, you don't go around thinking about this in your day-to-day life. So if you get into some sort of situation, you're just going to act like any other normal human being. You're not going to go, oh, what does Scripture say? What does Jesus say? Or do with this? What does the Old Testament say? And what was that bit in Deuteronomy? You get, I've forgotten. No,
you just do what you have to do.
Deal with it. That's it. it's a survival mechanism. You're not thinking about morals, what's right or wrong. If you're in danger, you just deal with it. So
it would be hopeless, wouldn't it, if we had to consult a list to see whether
Yeah.
what we're about to do, like, save Andy from electrocuting himself, was approved by this list somewhere on the menu. Does it?
Yeah, it'd be like the heads-up display in the Terminator, wouldn't it? So what's
right.
the appropriate response for that? It doesn't work. But we've got religionists who are saying, where do atheists get their morals from? Yeah, we've covered that.
The same place as everybody else.
But they're also claiming that they've got their own moral guidelines, which claim to be coming directly from God or interpreted by the clergy. But we see that all goes out of the window when we got things like Crusades, Spanish Inquisition, all sorts of torture, witch hunts, misogyny, anti-homosexuality. I hate using the word anything but phobia in it, because it's not correct. So we've got all that, and then we've got huge problem with sexual abuse, and that's either child or adults. So it spans the whole in the church and all sorts of different religions. So that, on one hand, you're saying this is what God telling us to do because we might go to hell. If we don't do that, we'll go to hell. But on the other hand, there's all sorts of abuse going on with children and adults and teenagers in churches. Now, atheists don't get their morals from anywhere apart from just being generally nice people. Most of them are. And there's
also one last. Sorry, there's one last point, because I know that we're running out of time. And there's also one last point I want to make here is when religious people try to impose that morality on those that don't believe in that. There's that wonderful cartoon of the two women in the park eating an ice cream, and the man comes up to them and says, "I'm sorry, but my religion says you can't eat ice cream in the park." And the women said, "Well, don't then." And he turns around and said, No, you misunderstand. Because I believe it, you can't do it either. And I think that might be a topic for another time, of the imposition of religious morality on others. So I think it's probably a good idea. I'll bow to Andy, but I think it's a good idea that we sort of cap it off there.
Yeah, that's fine. I think we'll talk about this a little bit more on other.
Well, so many of our videos have come back to this topic. So
they have. It does come back time and time again. But what I'd like to do is at some point talk about the concept of morality based on the well-being of others, and if that was actually part of our social structures and taught as vigorously as religion, if that sort of concept of well-being of others is paramount because we need that for our society. If that sort of thing was as much pressure was put on people because of that, I think we'd just be living a much better world, rather than religious morality. So anyway, guys, I think that's been absolutely fantastic. Thanks for joining again today. Guys, we're going to be around next week as well. And so if you haven't subscribed, we really, really need you to subscribe as much as you possibly can. Getting other people to subscribe as well, because that helps with the algorithm, helps us to spread podcasts around and get people watching them and that sort of commenting. Comment on this as well, just to let us know your feelings on what we've been talking about today, or anything else about what we talk about. So until next time, we'll see you later. Ta-ra.
Bye.
See you soon.
Well, thanks for joining us today, and don't forget to click that like button. Also, make a comment, and of course, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.